Hello and welcome everyone to another webinar by DESelect. Today we have a really exciting topic, getting an A plus with marketing cloud strategies for higher ed success. Today's a fireside chat and I'm very excited to have our customers from Cornell University as well as University of Maryland Global Campus here. So let's introduce them. Today I'm joined by Alina from Cornell as well as Becky from Maryland Global. Alina, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, of course. I'm Alina. I'm the Marketing Cloud Technical Lead at Cornell University. I'm always trying to design technical solutions for Marketing Cloud and trying to drive initiatives so that our users are making the most of Marketing Cloud. I've been using it for about 8 years, and I'm a huge enthusiast and advocate. So thank you for having me here. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy this conversation.
Fantastic. And having a technical background myself, I'm very curious for all the things that you've learned and what I can still learn from you, because Marketing Cloud is a very versatile platform. Next up, we have Becky. Becky, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Becky Crosetto. I'm the Senior Director of Student Communications at University of Maryland Global Campus. And my unit falls within the Student Affairs unit at UMGC, and we focus on holistic student communications. And one of the major mass communications tools that we use is Marketing Cloud. We've been in it probably about 5 to 6 years now and been using DESelect for probably 3 years, about. And it's been great.
Well, I love to hear that, and that's also why it's so exciting to have you on the call. We've been working together for a while. It's been a pleasure having you as a customer too. I'll quickly introduce myself. So I'm Anthony Lamot. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DESelect. In a former life, I was a consultant for Salesforce, CRM, Marketing Cloud, and so on. But today I have the honor and privilege to be leading this little rocket ship called DESelect. And with that said, we're going to jump into the fireside chat. Um, and first off, for our guests here, I had a question for both ladies, for both Becky and Alina. Just to kick it off, what are some of the most recent challenges you faced with regards to student communication? Becky, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think on our end, it's always a challenge to just balance it all, right? You've got so many different types of communications that can go out to students, email, SMS, classroom notifications, phone calls, recorded voicemails, and just finding the right multi-channel mix, not bombarding students and providing the right messages at the right time so that we drive student success. That's a challenge, and we work on that every day. And Marketing Cloud has been great, and we just take different kind of techniques. I think what we find really successful for us is really unity internally with all of the different units that can send mass communication so that everyone's on the same page, and we have lots of conversations and meetings to keep everyone aligned. We have a shared calendar that also helps from that sense. But it is it's something you have to stay on top of. You want to provide a good student experience and also make sure that students, get the right amount of messaging and they don't get too much and then get annoyed and frustrated.
So I heard the right message at the right time, especially by having a shared calendar in the team. Alina, what would you say are some of the recent challenges?
Yeah, well, I can speak about sort of technical challenges involved in the students' communication. And one of them I would say is the fact that some of our teams didn't have instant access to create segments. And that was kind of a huge limitation because it limits your ability to create relevant messages and to actually target all the different interests across your student population. And I think that kind of the story behind that is that we actually didn't have an enterprise tool, a mass communication and marketing enterprise tool as a centralized tool across the university. And because of that, a lot of our units and departments were using like a standalone alone tools are not always connected to fresh data. And that was kind of a huge pain point because our users will need to kind of request manual lists and do like a lot of merging and deduplication on their own. And that was a huge limitation for us. And that's kind of how Cornell University meets Marketing Cloud as an enterprise tool that allows you to solve some of those issues.
That's great. I like how you phrased it that, we're using it at Cornell as an enterprise platform. And so you've kind of already described how Marketing Cloud fits into solving those challenges. So Becky, for you, how does SFMC fit in? How have you been able to leverage the platform?
Yeah, I think it's great. I would love to have one communication system of truth, and we've been moving towards a lot of our messaging coming out of that tool. But that is kind of, Alina touched on one issue that we have too, and challenges that we have is just, fully connecting all of our tools and our data so that we have access to do all the great things that we want to do. We can get so creative, but it gets challenging when you have multiple mass communication tools. And Marketing Cloud is great. There's a lot of like creative solutions that we can leverage in it, but we also have to keep in mind that balancing act. And I think we really loved some of the creative aspects of Marketing Cloud, like being able to use dynamic content, send time optimization. We use the embedded forms a lot to get students' feedback and then figure out that based on what they've told us, how do we then form our communication, the follow-up communication with them. And it's been great for that.
I love the creative aspect, the mix of creativity and technicality. Um, but before we delve deeper into that, I have a small poll here for our attendees, and it should be showing on the screen right now because we do want to hear where are our attendees at. So how would you rate the current level of alumni engagement at your institution? Very high, moderate, low, very low. I'll give everyone a second to reply. And while people are looking at the poll and filling it in, I also just want to remind everyone we love interaction and engagement on DESelect webinars. So if you have any question for the panelists, for myself, by all means, please put them in the Q&A. We'll either try to cover them as we go along, or if not, do a little roundup at the end. And meanwhile, poll results have trickled in, and I think everyone's very modest. I'll share the results. So on average, the moderate, sticks out there with 71%. A few people said very high, a few people said low. So yeah, moderate level of alumni engagement. So that's good. There's a room for improvement there. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Related to the poll, I'll start with Becky again. What have you find helpful to drive alumni and I'll even say student engagement?
Sure. I think I touched on a little bit the creativity and just the kind of thinking outside the box. How do we do things a little bit differently? I probably shouldn't share this, but I'm going to share it anyway. Like if a lot of people are sending messages around the lunch hour, we might send our message at 12:02 because a lot of people are going to set it up for 12 o'clock, right? So how do we hit the top of the inbox? Just kind of a little example of how do we think about things differently and how do we put ourselves in the student seat and think about, what they're doing at any point in time of day and how do we get our message to be top of mind? How can we use an engaging subject line or something creative within the email body, like using image carousels, something that will just keep their attention and their eyes on our message that we want them to pay attention to for even a couple seconds longer will really help.
I love some of those ideas you've shared, Becky. Can you tell us a little bit more about those carousels? I don't think that's something that a lot of people are using today.
Yeah, so it's imagine the image banner at the top of the email. You can set it up so that it's one image, but then it rotates to another image and then it rotates to another image. So it gives your email a little bit of interactivity look to it. And we know consumers' attention spans are very short. I mean, they're getting 100 to 200 messages a day. So even if, that little interactivity and motion within the email keeps their eyes on your message a couple seconds longer, then you've captured their attention a little bit longer. So you've got more odds that they're going to pay attention, read the full message, take the action that you want them to take and engage with your brand a little bit more.
I love it. Images have given me an idea for our own email campaigns. I do love carousels on social media too, on platforms like LinkedIn. They can be very useful as well. Alina, same question for you. Following our poll, what have you found helpful to help drive engagement?
Yes, and that topic I would definitely advise for embracing cross-channel approaches. And this is something that we are not currently doing at Cornell because we are in the early stages of rolling out Marketing Cloud and it's been like a year or so. But on previous experiences I have, I think that if our students are certainly on the go all the time, and sometimes they might not engage with your emails, but they do have the phone mobiles and they do engage through a lot of different ways through their mobile phones. So if you notice that someone is actually not engaging with your emails, you can try sending a text message or maybe just putting an ad in front of them, and that would probably feel like less invasive than just filling out their inboxes with emails that they will never read. So that would certainly be my recommendation, even if you have like an app, that's great, because let's say that you have alumni are not actually engaging with your emails and you suddenly see that they are around campus. Well, that's the right time to send them a push notification. And that's another way to probably re-engage them with your activities. So I would certainly, that would be my top one recommendation. And the second one would be just try to stay collecting as much data as possible. In order to connect with your audience, you really want to get to know them, and you could do that through data. So you don't only want to know that Alina is an employee at Cornell, you want to know if Alina is taking classes and what classes she's taking and what she likes, what are the interests. And I think that that's one of the best way to actually be relevant and connect with your audiences.
Amazing. And I think now the audience already gets a good idea of how Cornell is using Marketing Cloud truly as an enterprise platform, because I think you just described all the key capabilities that the platform has. So it's really cool to see that being adopted.
Yeah.
Well, great. All right. Becky, a somewhat different question on a more strategic level. How do you align your strategic goals with the capabilities of Salesforce Marketing Cloud to enhance those student communications we've been talking about?
So one of our strategic goals is just providing students with a seamless experience. And I think we focus on student centricity. And like I mentioned before, really putting ourselves in the student's perspective and thinking through how they're going to experience different experiences that UMGC offers. So part of that is just knowing who our students are and listening to them, creating a feedback loop where we can get information from them. And one of the ways that we collect feedback from them is we use the embedded forms within Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So for instance, you can just ask a really quick, easy question. You can put 4 stars up on the screen. There could be a comment box. And then students, when they receive the email, that little survey is just right within the email. It's quick, it's easy, it's they can very easily, without even having to leave their inbox, send us feedback, a couple clicks, and then hit submit. That hits a data extension in Marketing Cloud, and then we can trigger follow-up off of that. So sometimes we might trigger a call follow-up off of that. We might push the information back into Salesforce so that we can save the data and then trigger different things off of it later. So we just, again, I think try to think creatively about how do we leverage the capabilities to be able to drive that good student experience, seamless student experience, so that the students really appreciate being a student at UMGC and delivering that smooth classroom experience.
That's a great illustration of connecting a strategic goal to a very concrete tactic. Jennifer is adding in the chat, love this tactic, Becky. So I think people, it's resonating what you're saying. Alina, on the more technical side, can you share some examples of automations that you've implemented for attracting prospective students or maybe engaging current students and alumni?
Yeah, sure. Well, engagement is an area where our teams are constantly trying to improve. So on the technical side of Marketing Cloud, we set up a set of automations to help them with that. And what the automations do is that it basically looks at the engagement data, it looks at the data views that Marketing Cloud has, and collect all that data into what the results would be is like an email activity data extension that would have a lot of data on clicks, bounces, opens, and whether someone received an email or not. So we will have an email activity data extension that would say, okay, Alina opened an email on the last 7 days, it would be a flag. On the last 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, and 180 days. And it would do the same with clicks and opens and bounces. And then at the end, we would have like the last time Alina actually opened an email, it would be like a date field. You would have the last time Alina click an email, bounce, or receive an email. And this has been very helpful because now that we have that, all that information collected in the data extensions, our team can leverage DESelect and actually kind of join this set of engagement data with other attributes that we have in our core data extensions to create. We have a lot of different use cases. Let's say that someone had a sub bounce a week ago. Maybe you want to wait a little bit more before you attempt to send in another email. Maybe they have a full inbox and you want to give them like more time so that they can clean up their inboxes, and that's just an use case. Or you want to probably like send an email to someone who actually is clicking your emails in the last week or the last month. So it gives you a lot of possibilities and a lot of different combinations and how to use engagement to better target your different audiences.
That's great. So it sounds like what you've been doing is querying some of those data views and kind of abstracting some of the most actionable information to a data extension. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, exactly. It's like the information that we would use the most, and we would break it down by like periods, like 7 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, etc.
That's really interesting. I also love the fact that you linked it to one specific use case. I would be curious if you could also, because we have a mixed audience here today, if you could shed some light a little bit more on the technical aspect of it, or maybe if you could give some other use cases as examples so people can maybe get some ideas themselves.
Yes, well, on the technical side, it's just a bunch of SQL queries that print the data from your data views in Marketing Cloud. So that information is kind of transparent. It's not easily to get to that unless you actually use SQL queries, or you could also use DESelect. But after you get that, what we do is that we really organize it into those time frames, like 7 days, like 1 month, etc. And we create flags that are very easily to check. So you don't really have to ask the system what today, because you already have the flag turned on. So it would be easier for you to the end user. And let's think about use cases. Well, I know that the self bounces, we've been impacted with a lot of bounces, and we really care about that because it could impact our sender reputation. So we are very careful. We try to take that into consideration when sending emails. And for engagement, yeah, we certainly want we don't want to overreach to people. Let's say that we have, I don't know, like an event. You don't want to overreach to them. So you want to keep the users engaged. We have a newsletter, which is the Chronicle newsletter. And one of the main concerns that they have is how to keep the audience engaged and don't send emails to people who actually are not up in the newsletter anymore. So they would be able to use this data extension to say, okay, let's just send a communication to only the ones who have been engaging for the last 3 months. And on the other hand, something else, that another use case that we do is that, let's say that you haven't engaged for a long period of time, like let's say that I haven't engaged since August 2023. We could trigger a re-engagement campaign and say, hey, do you still want to receive this newsletter? Is this something that you're interested in? I don't know, what are the topics that you're most interested in? Let's say it's like a sport or research or whatever your interest is. And that's probably another use case.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I think it's a really interesting takeaway there that having all this data available in Marketing Cloud, like data views, is useful, but it's not always super actionable itself. And it kind of helps to stage the data, prepare the data in different format, like flags, so you can use it. And I love the use cases, including figuring out what part of your audience is maybe getting unengaged, so you can retarget them, hopefully win them back as an active subscriber. So that's great stuff.
Anthony, before you ask the next question, that got me thinking, you guys had an amazing article that taught me how to create a contact interaction report so we could see of our different student buckets, how many email communications they're receiving over a week's period, a month's period, and we have a lot of people across the university that have access to some mass communications, and that balancing act that I mentioned earlier is really complicated, and you have to align more with that many people. But the interaction report that you guys helped me develop was really helpful to see where we have oversaturation or undersaturation, and then we can dig in to who do we need to have discussions with across the university so that we can get that under control and not be either bombarding students with too many messages or sending too few messages. And it was all connecting those data views to be able to surface that report. And that article you wrote was really, really impactful for us for being able to pull something like that together.
That's great, Becky. Thank you for the call out. Yeah, we'll make sure that we share the URL once we upload this video too, so those listeners can find it and we can share it as a follow-up. Yeah, in general, we were talking at the very start of the conversation about right message, right time, and there's so much focus on the personalization and segmentation of campaigns, and it's super important, right? I'm not advocating otherwise, but even figuring out the right timing of the message can be so critical. Timing is everything. And we've also seen customers that start to experiment with optimizing their frequency. And sometimes to their own surprise, they find out they can actually push a little bit harder than they thought. Like maybe they thought before 3 emails per week is, that feels good. But when they look at the data, they can find that sometimes they can send a whole lot more. Not always, but sometimes. So great, love it. Just another check for our audience. I'm going to launch another poll here since we've been talking about some of the technicalities. Quick check, to what extent are you already using Salesforce Marketing Cloud's full technical capabilities? It sounds like Alina is already using quite a bit of them. Let's see what our audience is doing. I'll give that another second. And meanwhile, we're getting some other call outs in the chat too from the attendees about great tactics. Amy is saying that really is great. Once again, if you have any questions for the panelists, please share them. And thank you for applying to the poll. Meanwhile, I'm going to end this poll and just share the results on the screen. And as you can see, most people, again, a quite modest audience, moderately. So it's good to see people are adopting quite a bit of stuff. There are a few people who are not at all adopting the capability. So I hope today, after today, you'll be inspired to make the most of this quite incredible platform that offers so many capabilities. With that said, I'll stop sharing the poll and we're going to go back to some questions. Alina, I have another follow-up question for you regarding this poll. Could you share some key technical aspects or features of the platform that have proven particularly valuable for your initiatives? And you've already covered at a high level some of those capabilities earlier, but we'd love to hear some of the key technical aspects.
No, I think there is something that we probably take for granted when it comes to Marketing Cloud, but it's been very helpful, and it is the way business unit works. So this has gave us so much flexibility to accommodate only one instance of Marketing Cloud to a lot of different business needs, just because it allows you to kind of keep your data private, to keep like different workspaces for each group. We're trying to use Marketing Cloud as an enterprise tool. So that means that a lot of different groups across the university are going to be using it. And that means that they will have different data needs, they will have different business needs, and you have to accommodate those to all those needs. And business units have been really great to help us with that, because you can actually like decide what set of data each business unit will have access to. If someone have like sensitive emails or information, they don't really need to share that with other groups across the university. And at the same time, it actually fosters collaboration, which is great, because something that I have seen is that our departments or groups are actually sharing data extensions or templates, and it allows them to easily collaborate with each other, and that's amazing. So that's one of the features that I would highlight, even when it's kind of a one that we assume when we use Marketing Cloud. And actually, DESelect, it's been great. I think that for me as an admin, it's been like a before and after. we do have a lot of skill sets in our users, and all of them need to have autonomy and to be self-sufficient when creating segments and data extensions. And in past time, I would need to be creating data extensions for all of them because I don't really know how to use SQL to create the data extensions. But with DESelect, they can achieve that themselves. They can even create automations with drag and drop, and that's been amazing. So yeah, those are some of the ones I would highlight.
It's actually interesting because this kind of admin setup is what you would also expect from an enterprise scale platform. And I can imagine that for some of our attendees, their own environments have multiple users and a certain level of complexity. Um, could you share a little bit more about how you've set up your business units, user
Yeah.
access, permissions?
Yes, well, we do have a multi-org setup in Marketing Cloud. That means that some of our business units are directly connected to Salesforce, but we do have another set of business units that get the data through the parent business unit. So that kind of serve as a distribute that kind of distribute or all the data for those different groups that doesn't really need full access, and we just take all the data to that parent business unit, and then we distribute that into different segments and groups based on each need. So that's kind of how we set it up. But we do have other groups that do need access to Salesforce because they even do journeys that are automatically trigger with Salesforce events and data. So they will have kind of all you can eat, like everything that they need, they will get it from the CRM.
That's interesting. And so what I'm hearing is some business units taking data from Salesforce CRM, but from there we might push it through to some child business units. I'm guessing
Yes.
that's through shared folders.
Yeah, through Shell. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So we have all automations running on the parent BU, and that saves the data extension into different shared folders. That's how we say, okay, this shared folder is it's going to be shared only with the alumni business unit or only with the university relations business unit. That how kind of how we limit the access to the different data extensions. And I think that in the future we will probably have our instance connected to more than one Salesforce org. So we'll get there sometime.
That's great. You also said something interesting about segments, but I think you kind of already answered the question. I was going to ask, so how did you segment the data across business units? But it sounds like this is split between things like alumni, students. Is that right?
Yes, we like for example, we have an alumni business unit, so they will have access to all our constituent information. That is kind of how it's divided. And then we have the university relations business unit that mostly have access to, I don't know, like a students and employees information, or like we have a business unit for a student and campus life, which is mostly a students initiative. So that business unit would have access only to student data and not to all student data, so only the data that they actually need for their communications.
Yeah, makes all sense to me. Question here for Becky. I am kind of curious though, when you hear us speak about admin permissions, slicing and dicing of data depending on audience. What are your thoughts on that? And do you guys have a different approach to that? Are there some similarities?
Yeah, no, I think some similarities. I think for us, and when I think about it, just segmentation is key. Like thinking through, for the message that you have, who's the population that you really want to target, and really sending relevant messaging to those students. DESelect has been really helpful for us. I love segmenting in DESelect, and it just makes things easy. All of our journeys are segmented through DESelect data extensions, and then we save certain segments that we continue to hit regularly in DESelect. So all you have to do is check over the filter sets, run, and your population's ready. So it saves us like tons of time and efficiency. But just I would say the key thing there really is like making sure that messaging is relevant to the student that you're trying to reach, and segmenting is so important because if you don't do the segmentation right and the message isn't relevant to your audiences, they're just going to tune you out, and then you've got a whole other issue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we've always seen the importance of organizing your marketing cloud the right way, having good governance in place. And I've even seen it in my consulting career before. It sometimes starts with silly things like folder structure and naming conventions. It is nice for us to be able to also play a role in helping organize and structure the environments of our customers, because it makes a big difference in marketing operations. Um, Great. Well, my next question is again for both of you, and it has to do with a lot of things we've already touched upon. An overarching theme that I've noticed with customers is the difficulty, the challenge in finding that balance between automation and personalization. And let's maybe start with you, Becky. What have you found to be helpful to strike that balance between the two, between automation and personalization?
I feel like a broken record. I'm going to say student centricity and putting ourselves in students' shoes and thinking about what's the message that I need to send to them. What type of feedback do I need back from them? What type of action am I asking them to take? And then, thinking about your communications toolbox. You've got phone, email, SMS, all of these different channels that you can use to outreach to the student. I think it's just dependent upon what's the message, and then what type of conversation do we need to have with them to figure out what's that right multi-channel mix. And I think if you can do that, then you can find a way to make automation and personalization work together and in harmony, so that it drives efficiency internally. So for example, like if we know that we're asking the student to do something that's a little bit complicated and really they need to have a conversation with the student facing team, then and let's say we have like a very large list, but we only have a certain number of staff internally, we might use that embedded survey, ask a question, get that 20,000 student population to raise their hand for those that are interested, and then trigger a call follow-up from our limited resources of that student facing team to call those students who basically raised their hand and said, I'm interested. And then we're driving impact too, and kind of driving ROI in their best efforts internally to drive results too.
That's great. I think the biggest takeaway there, maybe for our audience, at least mine, would be define this automation versus personalization trade-off balance based on feedback loops. And I think that's interesting because I believe many people, many Salesforce customers who just start out with Marketing Cloud, they may be tempted to do these like very extensive exercises and kind of build castles in the sky. And it's okay to sit together, do a workshop, think about what the big picture should look like, it's critical even. But without actual data and usage and testing, I think it can be a bit of a vain exercise too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You said something interesting too about adjusting the channels you're using. You mentioned text message and email, maybe also push. So what's the link there between personalization? How do you go about that? And maybe even have an example. I don't know.
So I think today's consumers, like, they're busy, right? I mean, a lot of our students are working adults, so and some of them are balancing working, family, and school. And today's society, I think, is used to, they've got their mobile devices and they're just constantly busy, and they're getting bombarded from every angle, from us as their university or school, but also retailers and kids, family life, balancing a job and so forth. So I think we do a lot of testing on what that multi-channel mix is, and we also recognize that there's not going to be a one size all fits everyone's solution. Everybody is different, and so like we're collecting students' preferred channel, and some people might prefer to get a phone call and have that conversation with their success coach. Others might prefer text messaging and they don't have time to talk. It just needs to be like quick and easy, and texting might be a great solution for them. So we're trying to collect the right data so that we can figure out what is that right mix for that individual student. And that's part of, I guess, the balancing the automation and the personalization. Like, you can make it work together, and you can optimize and you can drive efficiency internally. You just have to collect the right data and leverage it the right way.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Alina, same question for you. You already spoke about automation, but how about balancing it with personalization?
Yeah, I think that I'm kind of on the same page than Becky. I think that you certainly want to use automation so you can streamline your business processes, but you also want to deliver great experiences. But those can actually work together. I don't think I don't think that because you're using automations, you cannot deliver a custom experience. You could do both. Maybe for customer support, there are areas where you really need the human touch, but there are a lot of different ways you could certainly automate and also use the data that you have about your users to deliver custom experiences. I think it's essential to have a good set of information and data about your customer, because that will give you more options on how to customize or trigger those communications. And if you have, let's say, like a long life cycles, it's very important to have your data fresh, because you don't want someone to start journey. Let's say that you are like promoting a fundraising event or something like that, and it takes like about a month or so. So it's like a month. And if it's been 2 weeks, you don't want to keep sending communications to someone who already signed up. So you really want to have your data fresh, and you want to know like when people sign up, if they actually already donated, so that you can kind of customize the automation and customize the different paths for all those users based on the data that you have. And be constantly testing. Just because you created a journey, it doesn't mean that it's going to work forever. Behavior changes over time, so you have to be on top of that and be testing just to adjust it based on what's happening.
Thanks for sharing that. So I hear customizing different pathways and keep monitoring over time because behavior can change. I think that's all very insightful. As we're starting to get closer to some closing thoughts, Alina, for fellow administrators in the audience, what advice would you give when it comes to effectively managing and optimizing SFMC?
Yeah, well, with higher education, I have found something that's different, that Marketing Cloud is used not always to send marketing emails, which come very naturally with Marketing Cloud, but also to send transactional communications. And in the case of the university, that means communications that are essential for university operations, like public safety announcements or president messages. Those sometimes goes out of Marketing Cloud. And if in those cases, we don't really care about conversions. What we really need is that email to be delivered and to be in front of our users. And for those cases, I have found really helpful to have a close collaboration with the internal email team on your organization, because they certainly help with applying any necessary rules to have those emails delivered to your internal email addresses at the university. And you need to be constantly kind of updating your email headers so you don't miss anything that could help to get those emails delivered, especially when it comes to internal email addresses of the university. And something else that I would recommend to do as the best practice is that we do keep a testing environment. We use a business unit as a testing environment. So for any admin, I know that Marketing Cloud doesn't have like a native sandbox environment that you could leverage, but we do use a separate business unit for that, and it's been very helpful. Like, let's say we have had users that wanted to test like approval workflows. That's something that will break the way your business unit work. And you really want to make sure that they test it and they feel comfortable using it before you actually move that to a production business unit that can actually affect actual campaigns and sends. So we do that. We use it for custom development. It's very helpful. So that's another recommendation. And lastly, just stay connected. Just try to be up to date with the latest release. Try to get it get a good network of people who are probably facing the same challenges as you. That's been very helpful for me in my personal experience.
I think that's a ton of great advice, and I love how you ended with stay connected, I hope. And I think
Yeah.
people listening to this call will certainly find some great advice in there. Becky, do you also have some closing thoughts for us? Like in your role, how do you measure the impact of communication strategies on student engagement? And of course, how has SFMC contributed to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think each campaign has its own goals, right? And they're all a little bit different, but ultimately we want students to have a good experience. We want them to be successful and we want them to meet their goals, right? So if we have a education progression campaign, the goal of that campaign is to get current students finishing up their current degree to consider what their next step is with the UMGC. So if they're finishing up in the undergrad, talking to them about graduate opportunities. So ultimately we're trying to drive continued education, and that's obviously measured by applications into the next level program, but some kind of leading metrics and KPIs that we look at are, is the messaging strategy resonating with them? So looking at open rates, click-through rates, call connect rates. And I think what Alina mentioned is key there. Like, you don't launch a journey and then it's done. There is an element of journey management that's not only like keeping the content fresh, but looking at the overall strategy and is it doing what you want it to do? Is it really driving the results that you want? And that's a big task. So I think just continuous review of your campaigns and is it delivering the results that you want? And then just thinking outside the box and also like Alina mentioned, and you mentioned, Anthony, connection is key. Like you can learn so many great ideas from, I just heard Alina say a bunch of things that I want to go try. Just joining webinars like this and connecting with peers, outside of your university. I think you can learn a lot of things, even outside of the higher ed industry, that you can just think about differently and creatively apply to your strategies.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Becky. And with connection being so key, I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Just a bit of a placeholder slide here while we open the floor for some Q&A, because we do have time for a question or two. So I'll give the audience a second if anyone has some questions. So here's a question. I think this is for Becky. You spoke earlier about student outreach. Can you tell a bit more about the collaboration in for that campaign with other departments?
Yeah, we partner with people all across the university. So for instance, if we have a financial aid type campaign, I look at my peers over in the financial aid department as the content experts, and my team, is really good at the messaging and engagement. How do we do creative things with our channels to really drive results? But ultimately, it starts with that conversation with the content experts, with that financial team to talk about, what message do we need to send? What do we need the student to do? And then we overlay, our voice and tone and sentiment on top of that, and then try to get creative about, how do we drive that action? But we have so many partners across the university, and it's really key to have those right conversations with the right people internally so that you can drive impact with your campaigns.
I kind of imagine, just tying it back to something you said at the very start, that the campaign planning part here plays a crucial role as well. I have a hunch.
It does, yes. And you
Thanks.
can't do that alone. I mean, you need to partner with several people across the university to really get it right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially for such tailored campaigns where you're literally doing student outreach, you need to work together with maybe a counselor or teachers. There's just no way around it, right, to be effective. There's a question here for Alina too. It's actually about email deliverability. Are there certain things you found useful for increasing email deliverability, working with bounces, unsubscribes, those kind of things?
Yes, well, we do have some automations in place to auto suppress bounces, and that have helped us a lot with bounce management and also with sender reputation, because we have experienced a high amount of bounces in the past, and by excluding those who are permanent bounces, that that those are not deliverable anymore, we've been able to actually clean up our leads and reduce the amount of bounces and increase our sender reputation. So I think that some sort of auto suppression list for bounces is something that have worked for us pretty well. Um, in that sense, we also, as I said, we work closely with our email team when it comes to deliver our messages to the university email addresses. They will help us to set up rules on the domain side of things in the university to make sure that emails are delivered. And so, yeah, those are kind of some recommendations I could give you. Like, keep working on bounces, maybe out the suppression list, keep monitoring that all the time, and yes, work closely with your email team.
Right, great. Thank you for sharing that. Meanwhile, we have another question. This time it's from Amy. How well does it work to have multiple people sending emails? We have agents and that would like that, but I'm not sure I get the rest of the question. I'll just phrase it this way. How well does it work to have multiple people sending emails? I think this is a question for both of you.
Yeah, I think that in Marketing Cloud, we have that global calendar where you can see emails are going out from all of the different business units. So if you are concerned about like saturation or something like that, you can probably look at that calendar. Maybe you can have a quick overview of what's going on the entire organization. And we also, for saturation, we also use this automation that I mentioned earlier, where we can see like how many emails or if someone have received emails in the last week, and we can kind of check engagement across different business units, because that automation will look at the enterprise level. It's not focused on only one business unit. So that's kind of a way to know that. But yeah, for future email campaigns, we would leverage that global calendar that we have in Marketing Cloud, so you can see if something is scheduled for another groups in the future.
Okay, I see Amy's answered. Okay, that's great. I don't know, Becky, if you would still add anything to Alina's
Sure.
answer.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a challenge. And we have several tactics internally to keep everyone aligned. We have internal alignment meetings, and the internal calendar of Marketing Cloud is great, but we find that for forward looking, it doesn't capture everything. So we use a shared Outlook calendar, which helps keeps the teams that can all send mass communication aligned. But it is a challenge, and you have to have, strong business relationships with those that have access to be able to truly do it right.
Yep, that makes sense. And I think with that, we have answered all the questions for today. Really appreciate your time, Alina, Becky. It's been great having this fireside chat with both of you. Thank you for being on today's webinar.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for everyone attending. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.